The Security Cabinet actually voted in favor of a complete takeover of Gaza City by October 7th, 2025. All of that is going to take some time. We simply cannot afford to have the entire Gazan population remain on the borders of the State of Israel. It's too much of a threat, and our military will be too thinly stretched. You can see the bones beneath his skin. And when the Israeli public became confronted by these images, the Israeli government had to respond. With this increased military pressure against Gaza City, we might yet get Hamas back to the negotiating table in order to avoid their complete and total demise. Hi everybody. Before we get into today's update, if you're enjoying this content, I just want to ask you to please hit the like button and be sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel, because doing so really does help us to reach an ever wider audience. And it's on that channel that you can get our latest updates and our exclusive content and footage. It's also there that we want you to leave your comments and questions so that we can respond directly to you. So again, be sure to hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Benjamin Netanyahu's decision, together with the Security Cabinet, to launch a full-scale military occupation of the Gaza Strip largely actually surrounds one city, one area, and that is Gaza City itself. Now, in Gaza City, there are about 1 million Gazan civilians that still reside there. The process will be as follows. The Israel Defense Forces will inform the Gazans that they have to leave the area. As the Gazans are leaving the area and are evacuated from Gaza City, the IDF will establish all of the requisite absorption facilities needed so that the people leaving Gaza City are able to continue on to where they're told to move towards. So those preparations will include the establishments of field hospitals, medical centers, tent cities, so on and so forth. In addition to that, the United States of America has announced that it's going to increase the GHF distribution points from the number of 4 distribution points, as is currently the case, to 16 distribution points, which will enable the far freer flow of humanitarian aid to Gazan civilians. Once that process is undertaken, once the Gazans have left Gaza City, you will see the Israel Defense Forces ramp up its operations in that enclave. And the Security Cabinet actually voted in favor of a complete takeover of Gaza City by October 7th, 2025. It's a symbolic date for obvious reasons, and that has actually been ratified by way of a vote in the Security Cabinet. All of that is going to take some time, so it's not as though there is a declaration and a vote to conquer Gaza City and then the conquest is complete. It's a process, it will take some time, but it's vitally important that it's undertaken. One cautionary note, in my opinion, anything that is put forward and carried out by the Israel Defense Forces under the direction of the Israeli government that results in the Gazan population relocating out of the Gaza Strip beyond the borders of that enclave is a positive development, in my opinion. Anything that falls short of that, perhaps, for example, the permanent military occupation, not only of the Gaza Strip, but of the Gazans themselves, approximately 2 million in number, I believe would be a grave mistake for the State of Israel. I think it's impractical, I think it's unsustainable, and it's why I want and hope that the Prime Minister will refocus his diplomatic efforts to implement the vision of President Donald Trump to have the Gazans relocate outside the Gaza Strip and to have them build their lives elsewhere. We simply cannot afford to have the entire Gazan population remain on the borders of the State of Israel. It's too much of a threat, and our military will be too thinly stretched. The state of Israel has made the decision to do this now because, in part, of some of the images that were released by way of the Hamas propaganda video last week. And I want our viewers to actually take a look at some of those images. They released a video of the hostage Evyatar David. This is what Evyatar David looked like prior to October the 7th. A young man full of life, full of vim, full of vigor, and happy in his day-to-day existence. When Hamas released the video last week, they showed an image of Evyatar David kept captive inside a dungeon, deep underground, inside the Gaza Strip. He is completely emaciated. He is skin and bone. He cannot possibly survive in this condition for too much longer. He's almost a macabre anatomy chart. You can see his clavicle. You can see his shoulder blades. You can see his forearms. You can see the bones beneath his skin. And when the Israeli public became confronted by these images, the Israeli government had to respond. There is an urgent need to do everything that we can to bring our hostages home, and there is an urgent need to, at the very least, try to drive Hamas back to the negotiating table. And it's believed that with this increased notion of military pressure against Gaza City and this increased suggestion that the IDF will take over and essentially conquer the entirety of the Gaza Strip, that we might yet get Hamas back to the negotiating table in order to avoid their complete and total demise. There's pressure coming on Hamas from the Qataris, there's pressure coming on Hamas from the Egyptians, and of course there's pressure coming on Hamas by way of the ratcheting up of the military operations inside Gaza. But it's not an easy decision. There is a perception and a very real fear that the IDF going into where it plans to operate may endanger the hostages. The only thing I want the viewers to keep in mind is that nobody in the Israel Defense Forces, in the Israeli security establishment, is at all of the view that the hostages can be discarded as a major consideration for a conclusion to this war. It's a very clear, reiterated and restated war aim, alongside the toppling of Hamas and the prevention of Hamas ever constituting a threat against the state of Israel. Again, is the need for all of our hostages to be returned to us, the living and the dead. That goal of the war has not changed, and the ramping up of pressure may yet bring them home. There's a lot of media swirl at this time here in Israel around the idea that there is dissent against this plan coming from none other than the rather recently minted Chief of the General Staff, Lieutenant General Eyal Zamir. And to be perfectly frank, I don't think that people need to be unduly emotional about the fact that there is dissent and disagreement between the Chief of Staff and between the government of the State of Israel. Ultimately, Israel is a democratic state. The military branch is subordinate to the elected branch here, as ought to be the case. But as is common in most every other democracy, people have the right to express their opinions and to put forward their guidance and to put forward their counsel. And that's precisely what Eyal Zamir is doing. Rightfully so, correctly so. It's absolutely appropriate that that would be the case. But ultimately, the decision-making is for the government. The implementation is for the military. It's also worth noting that the military operation that's being decided upon is something of a middle ground between Eyal Zamir's preference and the perceived preference of the government of the States of Israel. The government of the States of Israel wanted to move towards the total conquest of the Gaza Strip militarily, not the annexation of the Gaza Strip, not the application of sovereignty over the Gaza Strip, because that complicates things massively in the near and long term, but the conquering militarily of the Gaza Strip. Eyal Zamir was calling for the intensification of the strongholds around the last bastions of Hamas's presence inside Gaza. So those are two different positions. A meeting point between those two is actually the targeting of Gaza City in the initial phase. It at once intensifies the military operation and conquers more of Gaza, and it also tightens the noose around the necks of Hamas operatives there. So it is something of a compromise that we're seeing, despite what the headlines say. Furthermore, keep in mind that all of the military options that were put before the government were put there by Eyal Zamir. It's perfectly reasonable to consider that the decision on which the government voted is not the one that Eyal Zamir would have preferred, but it is his brainchild, one of several, and his duty is to now implement the decision of the government. Expanding the military operation in this way may result in the driving of Hamas back to the negotiating table. If it does that, I think that that's a positive outcome. It could also result in the toppling of Hamas as a military force, a military threat to the state and the people of Israel in perpetuity. If it does that, I believe it's positive. But there's also the other side of the coin, and we have to look at that side square in the eye. There is a possibility that this will endanger the lives of the hostages who are held in captivity in the brutal conditions that I just showed you. The hostages' lives must be preserved to the fullest possible extent under any and every scenario. Now, there are observers of what's going on here in Israel who actually wonder out loud why it is that Israelis care so very much about what many perceive to be a rather low number of hostages, 50 in total, 20 of whom are perceived to still be possessed of life. And the answer is, we just do. It's part of our culture. It's who we are. We feel a responsibility to our hostages as though they were us and as though we were them. We feel a responsibility to the hostages such as Evyatar David, because we know that Evyatar David could be the son of any one of us. And the Israeli people will not feel whole and complete until the hostages are released by Hamas and are brought back home to their families and to their land here in Israel. The second complication that can come from this operation is the permanent, potentially, military occupation, not of the landmass that is Gaza. I'm not troubled by the Israel Defense Forces maintaining military control over the Gaza Strip, but I'm very, very troubled about the possibility and prospect that we will end up having responsibility for a total of 2 million Gazans. That, to me, is a deadly trap for the future of the state of Israel. It is a burden that would be placed upon the shoulders of the members of the Israel Defense Forces that I don't frankly think we're geared up for or prepared for at this time. If it's temporary, that's one thing. If it's long-term, that's an entirely different level of complication and complexity. And so, as I say, I believe that whatever we do in this operation, we should be looking to a long-term outcome that sees the implementation of the Trump vision for Gaza, namely the opportunity and incentivization for the Gazans to relocate beyond the confines of the Strip. That is the only outcome that I view as practicable and sensible in the current context.